50. You went like straight into retirement age and beyond. Curlers in your hair.
Yeah, I went for it. And I also wore this for you, like our Glitter Kittens shirt.
That is magnificent, actually. That's the only part of my outfit that I'm not pleased with, because I was like, would a 50-year-old be wearing the alien t-shirt? If it's a 50-year-old Nikki, then yes, but I'm loving this whole look in so many ways. And I like the banner behind you. Please notice that one of the accessories that I got was this toilet paper that says,
I saw that,
50.
And I almost bought it, but then I didn't. So I'm glad you did.
We are kindred spirits. Well, I think the big reveal behind us, now we're going to podcast like this. Oh, and can you tell that I tried to make my hair a little bit gray?
Oh, yeah, I totally see it.
Trick is baby powder.
Oh my gosh!
I decided like the full-on granny wig, like 50's too early for the full-on granny wig. That's like you went like well into retirement age with your outfit, and I love it. Oh my goodness. Well, shall we reveal what the purpose of today's episode is?
Yes. Do you want to reveal it?
Totes my goats. So guys, welcome to the IBS Freedom Podcast. Believe it or not, this is us, Amy and Nikki. Could you tell? And today we're going to be talking about aging and the gut and the body at large. And we'll talk about some of the implications of getting older and into your silver years, or, into the graying hair years. But first, hold on, let me prepare a beverage, because I really tried to take on the whole, 50-year-old birthday. Like, what do white ladies like to have at their birthday, Amy? Wine.
Dang, I brought this. I didn't go the 50-year-old. This is just what I like drinking.
No, we're gonna have little red wine from Trader Joe's. And now the white lady 50-year-old birthday is complete. But guys, can you believe this is the 50th episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast, which is why you see the weirdness before you that you do. I know if you're not watching this on YouTube, you are missing out. Let's just face that. But we thought that this would be a nice time to celebrate and toast to ourselves 50 episodes of wonder and excitement and joy and hopefully education and useful medical tips. And now we're going to talk a little bit about aging. So since you are clearly the elder between the two of us, would you care to weigh in? Are you photographing me?
I'm trying to. There's a lot of glares. I might try again later.
We can take screenshots later.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
The glory of the computer will allow us to do that.
Right. But, what was I thinking? Taking a screenshot or a picture of a screen. That's an old thing to do,
Well, yeah, but you know what you should have done? You should have gotten like a disposable camera.
Right.
The kind that actually uses film that you have to get developed.
My dad did that for years. Like, he'd go to my cross country meets and he'd take them, but he wouldn't get a what do you even call it when you go and bring
developed.
it to developed?
Yeah.
He wouldn't get them developed till 5 years later. So everything would be 5 years in the rears. Like, he would bring pictures and we'd be like, when did you take these? Like, this was so long ago. But yeah, it's so exciting. I'm excited that we've made it 50 episodes. It seems like time's flown.
It has, because it has. That's the reason why. It feels like just yesterday that I was creepily asking you to start a podcast with me, even though we didn't know each other from a hole in the wall. Like, not really, at least.
Right. So. Right. I feel like I was the chosen one. That's high praise.
Indeed. I was pretty pumped when you said yes. So here's to another 50. Oh my gosh, what do we even do for the 100 episode? Like, we're going to have to dress up like 100-year-old grannies, I guess? Or something. I don't know. This is going to get more complex as we go along.
I don't know, but...
Do they make tiaras that say 100? Like, blinged out tiaras? Because I feel like...
I don't know.
This kind of completes the ensemble.
What could we do at 100? I feel
I'm
like we
getting
might have.
distracted by the curlers in your hair.
Oh, sorry. They've been like falling out. They're not like they just keep falling out in my head because I keep having to like put this thing on, and I was like kept taking off these like little glasses which would go over.
That's a nice touch too. Not gonna lie.
I kind of like these. Maybe I'll attach these to my glasses.
They're actually quite functional. Yeah, they serve a purpose for sure.
Aren't they called like croquis or something? It's something like that. Or maybe
Good
that
point.
was just like what the frat guys wore in college. I don't know if it's a brand or actually what these things are.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've only ever seen old people wear them. And fun fact, they make another style of that, kind of. But it's like, think of like a rubber band or a headband, and it like attaches to both arms of your glasses, and then it's supposed to be like snug around the back of your head. My mom made me wear those when I took ballet lessons because she was afraid that my glasses were going to fly off my face when I spun, and then that was going to be embarrassing. So I had this like dorky way to strap my glasses on around the back of my head. Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
They had that.
It was a nice look.
Basketball, they just had rec specs. Did you know rec specs? Have you heard of those?
No.
They're like the actual goggle type glasses that like basketball players wear. They're called rec specs. I should have had some rec specs. Those were like, I think I didn't like them growing up because I didn't think they were cool, but now I kind of like them.
Yeah.
Like they're retro.
One time my mom got me a rear view mirror for my boat, which you wear on your head. This is like a tangent before we get to actual information on this podcast. But so I was a rower, right? And I have a single, so it's only you. You don't have the coxswain, so you don't have somebody to steer for you. So that means as you're rowing, you have to turn around and look over your shoulder to make sure that you're not going to hit something and like, capsize your boat.
Right.
So you would constantly be turning around to make sure that you're steering the right direction. And some dorky company makes, like, think of like a 1980s sweatband, but with a rear view mirror coming off of it. And the mirror's like right here. And my mom got one for me and wanted me to wear it in my single, so I was safe. And it was the most mortifying thing in my entire life, probably.
Gosh.
I wore it like twice and was like, actually, it's more confusing wearing the mirror. When you're used to just turning around, it's weirder to have the mirror right in front of you. So
right,
yeah,
I'd almost wonder if you would forget that the mirror was there and still turn, if that was your preference before. But
well, and everything was reversed in the mirror, so I'd be like, oh, I need to go to the left. Oh shoot, other left, kind of a thing. Yeah, not a fan. But anyway, shall we talk about aging as we have our little 50th party here?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of different avenues we could go down here. Is there a specific, do you want to start with like just microbes in general and aging? Or, because we could talk about like digestive function too as you age.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to start us off, is digestive function, and then get into microbes, and then maybe foyer over into like metabolism a little bit, because your metabolic need goes down as you get older also. But you're the elder. You're the elder today.
Okay.
So I'll let you be the picker.
Excellent. I like this. Well, I think let's start with digestive capacity. I think that's a good place to start. And I think the big thing that I think of when you age is that usually stomach acid just naturally declines. That's the big one that I think about. And it can, like, your need for stomach acidity is going to increase, so you might need to support it in different ways. And it's interesting because I know we've talked about on the PPI episode, like, that's pretty much about the time when most people take PPIs, is like they hit middle age and they're like, well, I can't eat that much food in one sitting without feeling indigestion. I think I need to take some antacids. Or like I saw that commercial with that guy that couldn't eat hot dogs, and then he took the PPI and could eat all the hot dogs that he wanted. So
remember when they had Larry the Cable Guy doing the Nexium commercials?
Oh my gosh.
how did that transpire? I don't even know, but continue.
Yeah, but it is always interesting that it does seem to correlate when people's acidity is starting to decline to probably an extent where they might need some more support is when they're noticing, oh, I need like an antacid, or I need something to help with some of these upper GI symptoms. So that's kind of fascinating. But yeah, and I've definitely noticed it with my clients too. Some of my clients that are like more middle-aged, kind of going into their 50s, 60s, definitely need more HCl support than someone that's in their 20s. And I've heard sometimes there's like just a natural decrease in, like, sometimes there can be gastritis at play with some of that. But I do think it's interesting. Do you feel like you've noticed with some of your older clients a higher need for stomach acidity?
Yes and no. It's hard. I haven't really made a point of tracking it. And I have seen a fair amount of like 20 something and 30 something year olds who have like self-prescribed tons of betaine HCl.
Right.
They come in and they're taking like 12 capsules per meal sort of thing. But yeah, I think that it's more of a given the older you get. Like I've seen studies that suggest if you're older than 50, or certainly if you're over 60, you have more of a risk of hypochlorhydria. And what was interesting was I saw a study, well, I don't know if it was a study, but it was like a review paper that I saw recently, and they were talking about one other study where they actually had the study plotted the pH of the stomach like pre and post meal. And the real difference, it wasn't necessarily the fasting pH that was that different between the cohorts, like between the young and the older group.
Mm-hmm.
But instead it was like they both started off at basically the same pH, but after the meal, the younger people were able to re-acidify their stomach much more quickly. Like within the span of an hour or two. But with the older people that they studied, I don't remember the age, but with the older cohort, you saw the graph where it was like starting pH, and for the young people, it was like, all right, back down within an hour or two. And for the older cohort, it was like, this kind of a progression. Like it was very gradual. And it took 4 hours or longer to reestablish that pH.
Interesting.
Yeah. But it kind of brings up the idea of like doing the Heidelberg test, for example.
Oh yeah.
Because I think, am I mistaken, but I think the Heidelberg test only looks at fasting pH. Like you put the capsule in or whatever it is, measure the pH, and then you're done with the test. I don't think they do like a full monitoring for a couple of hours post meal, if I remember correctly. So it makes you think maybe this is part of the rub with some of these studies where there's dispute about how common hypochlorhydria actually is. Maybe the problem is that we're trying to base that off of fasting pH, and that might not be that altered, versus post-meal recovery of the acidic pH. That seems to be the bigger player.
Right. Well, and I know, like, it's interesting, too, because thinking about aging as well, things like HRV tend to decrease as you age naturally too. Like I think there's nervous system potential for things like lower digestive capacity too as you age. Yeah. That could be prevented by certain things, or like the decline could be slower. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I wish the Heidelberg test was more prevalent. Like I've only seen it run in like 2 of my people that I've seen. And for anyone that doesn't know, the Heidelberg test measures stomach acidity and stomach pH. But yeah, I've also heard it argued, which is an interesting point. I haven't seen any studies or done tons of digging into it, or I've had some people argue that like H. pylori is a little more common as you age, which could decrease acidity as well. Have you heard that?
I don't think I've heard that. I will say I disagree tentatively with that. I actually just came off of kind of burning myself into the ground a little bit because I've been working really hard on, I go through like these periods where I'm just done with this, like overworking myself, but I've been working on a GERD and gastritis master course for the last couple weeks. So I've been reading a lot about H. pylori, and I've been reading a lot about GERD and gastritis and functional dyspepsia. And no, most of the papers that I was seeing were saying the opposite, that H. pylori is more common in younger populations.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, okay. So I think and H. pylori usually is acquired, like you pick up H. pylori in childhood. And it has more to do with like the setting that you were raised in. So like, did you grow up in a more developed country or a developing country? Or were you raised in like a mid-class or, you know, higher class or socioeconomic environment or a low socioeconomic environment? So low socioeconomic environments and growing up in a developing country rather than a country like the United States or UK, that's associated with more prevalence of H. pylori. So yeah, I was seeing the opposite actually.
Yeah, I had never done any digging. I heard a blip of that before, but it's interesting you've done the research and found the contrary.
Yeah, recently. Yeah.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. I will say too, it kind of makes me think back to our conversation with Thomas, because remember how he was talking about how iron deficiency makes it really difficult for your mitochondria to generate enough ATP to run the proton pump and keep the acid level in the stomach appropriate. Well, if you think how common is iron deficiency in the general population, and then you look, the older you get, especially as people are taking in fewer calories, because usually their hunger kind of mechanisms, you start to not get as hungry and you don't need as many calories the older you get. I wonder if iron deficiency is more common, and certainly mitochondrial impairment or dysfunction or like less efficient mitochondria is part of what happens with the body as you get older. So if you're, even without the iron deficiency, just the sake of getting older means that your mitochondria are probably working less than they were when you were in your 20s and 30s. And then that's going to make it hard to run your proton pump, and then boom, low stomach acid.
Right.
So that could be the trick.
Yeah, and I think too, just like, I don't know if this is common. I know in nutrition school, we talked a lot about, like, as you're getting older, the importance of making sure you're getting enough protein to help preserve muscle mass and things like that. And I don't know if it's just like my grandparents that I've been around a lot, but I feel like there's less awareness around like needing protein. And I think just in general population, like most women don't get enough protein. I think men are a little bit better about it, but I do think the more protein you eat, probably the more acidity you're gonna stimulate. Yeah. And I also think, the more protein you eat, you're probably going to get more iron if you're eating some red meat and things like that, which I think some of the older population have been bombarded with how bad red meat is. That's still sort of in the air. So I think it's a really interesting hypothesis too about the iron deficiency. And that potentially being a factor in aging, just from like maybe a lower intake of protein in general, and then potentially red meat. And then it just go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think also, I don't think it becomes as big of an issue until like 70s, 80s, 90s. But I think also I've seen a pattern, at least with my family, that like the older you get, it's counterintuitive, right? Because the older you get, the more you need to be aware of nutrition and really take care of yourself.
Right.
Even little things could wreck your body when you're older. But I've seen this pattern with my family that like the older, the grandparents or the elders get, the more there's this like, fuck it, I lived this long, just give me the Doritos kind of mentality. And I remember like with my grandmother, I'm pretty sure she only survived on bread products, Gatorade, and what are they? Mounds bars. Like, and she was a diabetic, mind you, so not super great. But it was like the older she got, the harder it was to get her to eat anything. So there kind of became this unspoken rule of like, look, whatever she wants, just give it to her.
Right.
But then I look at her diet in her last decade or so of her life, and I guarantee you she was deficient in a lot of different nutrients.
Right.
Because again, she was eating like bread and bread.
Right.
And Gatorade, because some bonehead doctor told my parents years ago that Gatorade was a good way to replace her electrolytes. So they gave this poor old diabetic woman Gatorade all the time. And Bounce bars.
Yeah, the same thing happened with my grandma too. And interesting, like, my grandma had cancer for like 35 years. Like, she would always say like, oh, I'm going to cancer treatment. And it was bone cancer.
Oh, great.
And again, she had it for a while. Like, it never like went into remission. She would just do cancer treatments like every month or so. But she, again, would eat Diet Coke and crackers. Yeah. And she would make like these elaborate desserts, and she wouldn't even really eat the desserts. Like, towards the end, like, again, getting her to eat ice cream was like, okay, grandma. Yeah. And at that point, you know, she lived to be 92. So she lived pretty long. And it makes me wonder.
For a lady who had cancer for 35 years.
Right. And she was a smoker. So she stopped smoking like probably around 55, 60. But it's so interesting to me, like, looking at her life, because I don't think she ever ate like really well, but I think she had really strong connections and relationships. And from like a longevity standpoint, I know that plays such a huge role in like living longer. And she had a really long health span too, probably until she was about 86, 87. She was still driving, and
it's pretty good.
Like, she would travel at 80, like with her friends. Like, they would be going, like, she would do international travel and stuff. So again, she lived a pretty long life, and it does blow my mind sometimes, like, me looking at what she ate. It's like, this isn't necessarily nutrient-dense food. But, yeah, I mean, typically protein is, like, the most satiating of food. So if your appetite decreases, sometimes it's a little bit harder to get protein if you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And again, minerals, vitamins, like B12.
Right.
Maybe, and again, your mitochondria really need vitamin B12 also. So, yeah, I think it's a slippery slope of maybe some slowed down metabolism, decreased appetite, getting to a point where you're like, whatever, I've earned it. I got this far. I'm just going to eat whatever I want now. Give me the Pop-Tarts or whatever it might be. And then, you know, it kind of snowballs from there.
Right. Right. And I think, again, like, depending on what age that is too, like, when they start to say like, oh, I'm done. Like, I've done my time. I'm just going to like eat ice cream. Because I think, like, I don't know, there's an aspect of that where I do think if someone's struggling to eat, like, getting anything in, and if that's like they're 92 and it's like, well, like, they're not necessarily in the best shape and this is what they want to eat, it's like you kind of just have to let them do what they're gonna do. But I think, again, like, earlier, if what you're saying, like, when they're in their 70s and 80s, even their 60s, like, you can still do a lot nutritionally. I think it's so much harder to build habits the older you get is the real crux as well. Like, you're so much better off trying to build some of these habits early in life so that it's not such a huge adjustment as you go into your 60s, 70s, 80s. And again, like, some of the things you're doing now and the habits you're building can affect your microbiome. And again, as you age, put you in a better spot from a microbiome standpoint. So yeah, I mean, I do think it's starting the trends earlier rather than later seems to be the most helpful and seems to lead to sticking things out longer from what I've seen.
Makes sense to me. And to that point, talking about, just starting with that foundation of low stomach acid and deficiencies and not so hot mitochondrial function, then we could start thinking also like leaky gut is, I believe I have read that leaky gut or permeability is more prevalent the older you get. I wonder if that's partially because of the low stomach acid thing or partially because of microbiome shifts. Similarly, I saw a really neat article where they compared the microbiome in the stomach, not the intestines, not the colon, but they looked at the gastric microbiome in people who were healthy, people who had H. pylori, people who had non-H. pylori gastritis, and people who are on PPIs. And the group, when you looked at the healthy normals versus the PPI group had, I believe it was somewhat less diversity, but also quite a bit more Streptococcus species, and less, I believe it was less Prevotella in their stomach. So again, it makes you think like that the low stomach acid probably is going to shift the microbiome in the stomach, and then it's going to disrupt motility potentially further downstream, and like the release of juices from the gallbladder and the pancreas and digestive enzyme output. So it kind of starts this chain reaction. So I almost wonder if there's been any real research on this yet, because I've seen studies where they look at the microbiome in aging and how it changes. But I wonder if they did 2 arms of the study and they corrected the stomach pH, did that for at least a month or two, and then looked at the microbiome, versus the people who still, have age-associated low stomach acid. I wonder how many of the dysbiotic shifts that we see in aging are due to the low stomach acid thing, or if they are intrinsic to the aging process in and of themselves. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an interesting question. And I think, again, what you're saying, too, is there's a cascade that happens when there's low stomach acid that's going to, change the microbiome potentially downstream. It's going to change motility. It's going to change digestive capacity. I even think, typically, from a bile flow standpoint, the older you get, especially for women, as they get over 40, you typically have a higher risk of things like gallstones and sludgy bile issues.
Removal.
Right. And again, that's going to affect motility and microbiome dynamics and things like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting, again, it's interesting, the intestinal permeability piece, because I think it's another reason to make sure you're getting enough protein too, as you age, because that would help somewhat. If you're not getting enough protein, it's hard for the gut lining to have enough building blocks to maintain a strong barrier.
Yep. Yeah, you have to build the mucus layer, you have to build the cells themselves, and the signaling molecules and the tight junctions, and a lot of that is protein-based.
You need everything, like what you were saying before. You do need, all of nutrition, but I think, just from what I've seen anecdotally, it's just hard sometimes to get protein in as you age. Yeah. And that's something that you definitely need to make sure you're getting enough of. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
To some degree. 'Cause, one of the questions I have on my questionnaire for new patients is whether they have a hard time digesting meat. And when people say yes to that, I'm automatically thinking, all right, we need to evaluate for low stomach acid. That sensation that meat will just sit in your gut like a brick of lead, or you're not processing it very well.
Right.
I'm thinking, all right, are you chewing it enough? Because a lot of people are deficient chewers, or chewing deficient, if you will.
Right.
And also, do you have enough stomach acid to break down the meat? And I've had patients who went vegetarian or they went vegan specifically because they felt like they couldn't digest meat. So they figured, all right, I'm not going to try. I have to go vegetarian.
Yeah.
And then we beef up their stomach acid, pun intended, and then they're able to eat some meat again. So again, it makes me wonder, if the natural decline of
Right.
stomach acid starts making people get more indigestion type symptoms and they feel less inclined to eat meat, and then that could make the problem worse and worse.
Right. Or if they start to get indigestion, then take PPIs. Makes the
Yeah.
situation 10
Gosh.
times worse. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Just that feeling of fullness. And I feel like, uh-oh.
That was weird.
Did we have a...
We had a hiccup.
No, I feel like someone jumped in the call. I would love for someone to jump in the call and just see us.
That'd be funny.
Oh, my, they'd be like, what is...
Dressed like this? Yeah.
Right, what is going on? But I lost my train of thought as we had a we had a go to meeting like photobomb. Someone came into the session.
I don't think that happened because I have it locked so nobody else can come in.
I don't know. I think they made their way in. They heard us. They heard we were having a party and
baby. Sweet, wish I should have another sip of my wine. But yeah, I think the audio, it looked like our audio cut out for a split second.
Oh, okay.
That's what it looked like on my end. I had a little pop-up come up.
I had a person come up.
Oh. Okay, that's really random and weird.
Not like an actual I didn't see an actual person, but I saw a video square pop up with a head, like the little emoji.
Oh.
That's why I was saying that. I know, that's why I was saying like we had maybe a go-to-meeting walk-in.
Oh my gosh, how bizarre would that be for that poor person to walk in and see us dressed up like this with our decor. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. Well, anyway, I'm going back to academic matters. So I want to also go back to the mitochondria conversation for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's something, like, I remember this coming up in undergrad even, in, like, exercise science. Because I remember, obviously, one of the best ways to either make new mitochondria or make the ones that you have extra happy and healthy, one of the best ways to improve mitochondrial health is exercise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like, all right, which came first, the chicken or the egg? As you start getting a bit older and you have a bit more fatigue, again, maybe because you're not digesting your food quite as well, nutritional deficiencies, mitochondria start to wane a little bit, you're going to have less energy and more fatigue, and then you might be less inclined to exercise. And it's like, there's oftentimes this steady decline in activity level. Like, I remember Mike's grandma and grandpa, they used to do century bike rides. Like, they would bike from Buffalo, New York, all the way, like, across New York State, several hundred miles with, like, a big group of their friends. They did those kind of bike rides well into their 70s and I think into their early 80s. And then, you start having more health problems or go to live in a nursing home. And now Mike's grandfather has passed away, but his grandma really doesn't leave her apartment at all now. So you've got to think that her mitochondria have taken quite a hit because of that.
Right. And I know transitioning to some of the microbiome studies, mm-hmm. We know that in general, movement and exercise seems to increase microbiome diversity in general.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But in some of the studies where they looked at the microbiome of people as they aged, one thing they did mention that it seemed like the people that were more active tended to have a better uniqueness is the term that they use. There was a study I looked at that was more recent. I think it was from May 2021. It could have been a little bit earlier, where they basically found that the uniqueness of the microbiome, and as it shifted, like it tends to shift more as you age, and the people that had more of a shift into this more microbiome composition uniqueness seem to have better aging outcomes. Whereas if someone's microbiome stayed the same, like relatively the same and didn't shift at all, like as they aged, they seemed to not age as well and have worse outcomes. And they seem to attribute that to activity level and like staying active and they said the word lean, so like staying lean and active as you age could potentially have a better aspect on this microbiome uniqueness that they're describing.
Well, and it makes sense in a couple of ways too, because right now the current theory is that mitochondria were bacteria that just basically decided to shack up with us, and they stuck around, and now they've been replicating and staying in our cells for who knows how long. But the theory is that mitochondria used to be bacteria, and then they've just changed enough to stick around with us. And it's a symbiotic relationship. So it makes sense that anything that is healthy for mitochondria is probably also healthy for your microbiome. So yeah, I think that that's important. But also, that's the powerhouse of the cell. That's how you make your energy. So not only is that going to impact things like energy level or fatigue, but also your nervous system. Like you need ATP, you need energy for your neurons to function. And as we mentioned before, in order to make stomach acid, your parietal cells need a metric ton of ATP to run the ATP pumps and pump out the hydrogen ions. So energy and mitochondria health really, really becomes critically important as you get older, and you can't afford to lose the mitochondria you have, and you can't afford for them to be inflamed and unhealthy. And that's my last point, is that also the mitochondria are one of the biggest sources of inflammation in the body, and they are the most susceptible to inflammation. So if you don't have enough glutathione or CoQ10, which is a whole nother topic, like how many people are on stupid statin drugs for high cholesterol? 8 gazillion% of the American population? I don't even know. But, you know, you start thinking of how many people out there probably have piss poor mitochondrial health, and then how that translates to gut health, bacterial health, motility, gut-brain axis function.
Right.
And then neural health, because it's very much a two-way street. And then, yeah, it's kind of no wonder why we're seeing some of the things that we do with aging.
Yeah, no, such a valuable point. And I think the cool thing of the things we're describing is there's, like with everything, there's so much that you can control, like a lot of different factors that are in your control. I think a lot of times when we talk about aging, there's this mindset of, well, my dad had heart disease, so I'm going to have heart disease. And my dad had cancer, so I'm going to have cancer. Like there's a worry, there's an extra concern. And maybe there's an increase of risk for some of these things, some of these chronic issues. But, you know, there's so many different things you could do to lower the risk. And it's not, the genetic side of things is not a smoking gun and going to guarantee you to get any of these chronic diseases that might be in your family. There's so many different things that you can control, like from a lifestyle and diet standpoint, that it shouldn't feel like you're doomed by anything that happened within your family. I think it's good to be aware of what the medical history of your family is or was, but it's something to be aware of and to do things that might help prevent it and be naturally just good for health in general. So things like movement and, you know, eating a diet that's rich in all the nutrients that we need or supplementing accordingly, I think so huge. And I even think from a microbiome standpoint, you know, the more diversity you can eat over time, I think the better you're going to be. Like we were talking about earlier, sometimes it's harder to break bad habits as you're getting older. Like it's going to be a lot harder to introduce more fruits and vegetables probably as you get older than starting kind of today or, you know, earlier is better than later. But you can always start at any time too. I don't want to tell someone like, oh, if you're 80 years old, it's too late or something like that. Right. I don't want to say that. I think it's just harder. It's harder to build those habits, I think, the older you get. But yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of it hinges on your attitude.
Right.
And that sounds really corny, but what is like the little story I've heard? Like a so there's two boys, twins, were raised in a household with an abusive father. The father was an alcoholic, abusive, horrible person, and the two boys grew up and became fathers themselves. One of them became abusive and an alcoholic. The other one, stand-up citizen, never touched alcohol, great father, great husband. And when the two boys, or the two men, were asked later on, what shaped you into the person you are now? Or what shaped you into becoming the father that you are now? They both had the exact same answer. Well, look at my dad. What else could I have done?
Yeah.
And it's like, you can take the same experience, good or bad or neutral, and you can make the most out of it and try to become a better person and learn a lesson and take that with you. Or you can use it potentially as an excuse or a crutch to justify the behavior that is somehow easier or more appealing. So it's like, all right, some people I think could get to retirement age. Like, okay, my father-in-law just retired last year during COVID. And he's actually doing a pretty good job staying pretty active. Like, he walks the dog every day. He does the grocery shopping now and goes out and about. And he's picked up like a hobby. He makes these wood sculptures that go on a fence. They sit on top of your fence, and he makes little beagle dogs and elephants and stuff. And he's trying to keep active. And it's like, all right, well, good. So he's not just sitting on his butt watching the Buffalo Bills all day, every day. I mean, he still watches the Bills, but he's not just sitting on his butt eating potato chips all the time. He is trying to still interact with family and go to the grocery store and do stuff. Granted, he only retired a year ago, but I could see some people being like, oh, I earned it. Now I'm going to sit on my duff and watch Netflix and eat potato chips for the rest of my life. I earned it, right? And it's like, well, you also don't want to squander your retirement years and your old age. Now, granted, in the same trip when we saw Mike's family recently, then same person, Mike's father, went on a tangent about how, well, he's going to be dead in 10 years anyway, so it doesn't even matter. Yeah, and meanwhile, our 5-year-old is in the room, and I was like, shh, stop.
Right.
Because he made a fine point. Mike was trying to talk to him about retirement finances, I think. And Paul's point was, hey, I've been a smoker for 40 years. I worked in longer, I think. He worked in a chemical plant as a welder for 40 years. And he's a diabetic. So he's like, no, but when I hit 75, if I make it that long, I'm going to be dead anyway. So I don't need to worry about finances that much. But I don't know, maybe he'll live longer than that, but it was just really disheartening to hear him say, yeah, I'll be dead in 10 years anyway, don't worry about it, Mike. It's like, oh my God. You don't have to be all doom and gloom, man.
Right. Well, and I look at my grandma, too, the one that lived to be 92. What's so interesting is, I don't really think she ate that well. I don't really think she was that active.
Yeah.
But she was super active in her relationships and connections, like I was saying before. I think she, at 85 years old, I mean, she would complain that her friends were dying off, Yeah. She would have those, but she'd still have, 4 birthday parties. She'd have way more birthday parties than I would, because she just knew everybody and was, super involved with her friends, even through her death. Or not through her death, but up until her death.
I was going to say, did she haunt their birthday parties? Because that would be awesome.
No, but I do think there was one study that looked at different factors and longevity. And again, relationships is at the top of the list, or connection, quality of your relationships, I think so key. And it's probably because there's so much good nervous system benefits and joy that comes from relationships too. So again, it's not all, doesn't have to be all nutrition or all movement or these sorts of things, but I think connection and relationships really matter too. For anyone that's trying to optimize their health, it's not even just for people in their aging years. I think, we've talked about with Dr. Franklin when she was on, how important connection is for vagal tone and things like that. So, Yeah, it's just interesting. My grandma was such an interesting case to me because it's like she was just so like she had so much energy but like I could tell like her lifestyle had horrible circadian rhythms too. Like her and my grandpa, meanwhile my grandpa died at 58, so died pretty young. But he was also like a World War II veteran and like I think saw some shit, you know, in World War II that wasn't great, like lots of stress from that. But I know he just ate all the crap that she made, I don't think she ate. But they would be up until all hours of the night. Like I think circadian rhythms are important too, like for overall health and gut health and things like that. But my uncle always jokes that, you know, one day he dropped off my aunt like after a date, like when they were, you know, in their teens. And my whole family was awake. It was midnight. And it was like, I don't think it was like a weekend. My grandpa was working. He would like organize papers because he was in the paper business. Like he would make copies and things like that. And my uncle stayed for like 2 or 3 hours and didn't get home till 3. And so he went home and his family's like, where have you been? And he's like, well, I was with like my girlfriend's parents, and they didn't believe him. Oh, like funny. They were like, no, you weren't. Like you weren't with
like, what kind of dysfunctional people are you hanging out with?
Right. Lies. But like just lots of stuff like that I find really interesting. But I do think probably the thing that she counted on and that seemed to like help regulate her in a positive way was some of her friendships. But in sort of her connections that she had. But it is always interesting, like the anomalies in the longevity space.
I think if I remember correctly too, I think I've seen some research that shared or that said that people who have better social connectedness and people who feel like they have a purpose in life, or like serving some greater good, like those two factors I think are both related inversely to inflammation. So when they measure like C-reactive protein and stuff like that, I believe both of those have been negatively correlated with inflammation. So it's interesting because it sounds kind of frou-frou to say that like, oh, you know, part of your prescription is to go hang out with friends or go on vacation. But it's like, no, actually it'll be really beneficial for you potentially. And speaking of totally weird and surprising things that decrease inflammation, another thing possibly related to aging and the gut and the microbiome is oral health.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you're bringing this up.
This situation can generate a lot of inflammation for you. And if you think like once you get your adult teeth, that's all you get for your life, which by the way, we should lobby to whoever created life and petition to change that, because freaking sharks get 8 gajillion teeth in their lifetime and we only get the one set of adult teeth.
Right.
How is this fair? So we need to petition God or whoever it is that created all of us. So side note to that, sign the petition down below. No, I'm kidding. But, you know, if you think like a lot of times oral health goes down the older you get too, like having more you know,
gum
canals, crowns,
right,
more like gingivitis and inflammation of the gums, and those things are associated with oral dysbiosis. And then if you think potentially funky bacteria in your mouth, and then you're swallowing about 1 liter of saliva every single day, and then you have low stomach acid potentially, well, a lot of those oral microbes are getting a chance to shack up in your stomach, which might explain why PPI users have higher, like about double the amount of streptococcus compared to normal people. And it's like the tangled web we weave, Amy. But then getting a dental cleaning has been shown to drop C-reactive protein by about 30%. So even stuff like that, like just taking care of your teeth and making sure you get regular dental cleanings can minimize the inflammation that your body has to deal with and keep your mitochondria healthy, and then maybe keep your motility and your gut lining and your microbiome healthier. And like it all kind of fits together. But you've got to maintain that healthy habit of making sure you're getting your teeth cleaned regularly.
Right. No, I think that's such a great point. My dentist sisters would be proud. And my dentist is sort of more of a holistic style dentist, and he won't even like operate or like not operate, but won't even clean your teeth if you have lots of blood. Like he will try to get inflammation to a very low point before you get a dental cleaning and before they do any sort of work on you. And so he'll give you like a regimen to help decrease inflammation in the gums. Like he's really big about inflammation in the gums because that's kind of where everything starts to go awry, and that's kind of where a lot of the inflammation can be driven from. But yeah, and I almost think about it even from a chewing standpoint. Like if your dental hygiene isn't great and it's affecting your ability to chew, or if it's painful to chew, as someone like I had a horrible mouth growing up. Like horrible. I had root canals at like 6 years old.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it was awful. And
woman.
I know. I swear I had 2 or 3 root canals, and I feel like 5 cavities. Like, what were my parents doing, honestly, with my mouth? But I had all these issues. I haven't had a cavity in adulthood, but I had all these issues when I was a kid. And I remember, like, it being very traumatic, like, being a kid and not being able to chew, or it being painful to chew. Like, I can imagine, too, that affects, like, function of your gut if, like, you're in pain while you're eating. Not a super fun place to be either. And I think, again, as you get into advanced age as well, it gets a little bit tricky if there's things like dentures and stuff like that, where sometimes that makes it a little bit harder to chew certain things like meat and like some of the things we were talking about. But I think it's a great point too, just from an inflammation standpoint, but like what you're saying from a microbiome standpoint, it's interesting. And you know, certain things that could potentially, some of the things that we typically not something you would typically think about from a gut health standpoint is the oral microbiome and the oral health, but I think it is really, really big. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. I think another thing that might not be thought about as much in the gut space is the immune system. Like, it's not to say it's not thought about, because God and the world, everybody on Instagram, YouTube, every podcast has probably told you, oh, you can heal your immune system if you heal your gut, right?
Right.
Like, you can heal autoimmunity, you can heal whatever. And that's largely true, but also it's a two-way street.
Right.
So if you have, if you eat all of the L-glutamine and all the probiotics and all of the fiber on planet Earth, but your immune system is jacked up, you're not going to have great gut health, probably. You need to actually pay attention to both sometimes and do like some immunomodulatory work.
Right.
Or bring down the inflammation. So that's another thing too, is that as we get older, our immune systems become less efficient. It's called immune senescence. So it's kind of like, think about the word senile, like senescence. It's the aging of the immune system, and it's where your immune system becomes less effective and less efficient. And like, you are less able to make what's called a clonal army. So like when you get sick, say with COVID or the flu, ideally you should have this core group of like T cells and B cells, for example. And you should be able to make clones of that army and make a big, powerful army of immune cells to help you tackle whatever the pathogen is. And then when you're done with the pathogen, there's clonal expansion and then contraction, and you shrink it back down to like that core set of like memory cells. That gets harder to do as you get older. Like the ability to make a lot of clones in a timely manner kind of goes out the window, and there's more of a predilection to go steer your immune system towards a more inflammatory phenotype as you get older. And like a lot of the anti-inflammatory kind of checks and balances start to become less efficient. So it leaves you more vulnerable to pathogens, which is obviously why things like with the COVID pandemic, like older people are being affected much more so by COVID. because they're not able to mount an appropriate immune response, and
Right.
it might be more of an inflammatory immune response compared to younger people. But that's something to consider, because 70% of your immune system lives in and around your gut, which means your immune system really, really affects the function and the health of your gut and your microbiome. So I wonder, if there was a way to like normalize that in a study and look at like microbiome diversity in people who have better and worse functioning immune systems. Like, I wonder what that study would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
I was going to tell you too, have you tried this before?
No, I haven't. Recess? Mm-mm.
It is like, I think it has CBD in it, and that it also has adaptogens in it.
Huh.
It has
Interesting.
chai tea infusion with ginger, clove, cardamom, rose petals, black tea, some blackberry juice, hemp extract, has L-theanine, lemon balm, ginseng.
That sounds pretty nice.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. This isn't my favorite flavor, but I like it. It's called Recess, if anyone's not.
And if anybody wants my beverage recommendation from this episode, this is Cherry Blossom Pinot Noir from Trader Joe's. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, Amy, I don't know. I think I might be out of things to share as far as aging and the body and the gut. One more thing I guess I'll throw out there, particularly for the ladies, but the gents, I think this would apply as well. Hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Those obviously change after about the age of 50. So for men, the older you get, past like your 30s or 40s, the lower your testosterone goes, the older you get. And with women, obviously, your estrogen and progesterone really take a nosedive after menopause. So
Right.
you end up you still have some, but your ovaries have basically quit their job. And they're saying, no way, Jose, I'm not making any juice for you. And now you're just left with the adrenal glands that are producing, I think it's like 5 or 10% of the hormone that you used to have circulating, because the ovaries quit their job. So that's a consideration too, because estrogen and progesterone interact with thyroid hormone, and they interact with insulin, and they're going to interact with like the immune system and that inflammatory or not inflammatory environment of the body. And then certainly if you have lower progesterone or estrogen, usually that means that it sets the stage for more of a tendency towards permeability, because both of those hormones help heal intestinal permeability. So it makes you think, again, like, I wonder how much of the effects of aging are because of this factor as opposed to some of the others that we talked about.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I definitely see it in a lot of, like, there's a subset of women that seem to have their gut issues. Maybe they had some gut issues before, but it really seemed to accelerate like as they went through menopause. I don't know if that's something you see regularly, but I feel like I see it relatively regularly, where there is like, it seemed to tip the scales in a way that made them seek out more help. And it accelerated in some way the gut issues that were already there. So that's such an interesting point that you're bringing up, that, as we age, even the hormone side of things, there's probably multiple different systems at play in some of this stuff, like what you're saying, the immune system, hormones, the nervous system. We've talked about. So, I mean, there's going to be different aspects at play. But yeah, I definitely see that, what you're talking about, the hormonal shift being a culprit in some of the gut issues in the people that I've worked with.
Yeah. And I think, too, it's valid to say this. Just because lower hormone levels set the stage for possibly more inflammation and less gut healing potential, that doesn't mean that the solution is to be on hormone replacement therapy for the rest of your life. Right? Like, because that's, in the conventional world, they'd be like, oh, low hormones are causing shit? All right, bump up your hormones. You're good. See ya.
Nikki, don't you want the hormones of a 20-year-old?
Why, yes, I do. No, it's like, it's just, you know, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works, right? It's like that commercial. But the point is, you know, maybe you can focus your efforts on other stuff, like trying to avoid other triggers of leaky gut, right? Like if you know that after menopause, you just might have a little bit more of a predilection towards leaky gut, maybe don't do other stuff that are going to encourage leaky gut. Like don't overdo it on the Pinot Noir. Don't, you know, take a bunch of corticosteroids or antibiotics and trash your microbiome. But also, you know, you can think about it too as like a deficiency issue. Like, yes, the total quantity of your hormones will be lower, but why don't you focus on making the 10% that you have, or whatever is remaining now? Why don't you focus on making that really efficient? And if you want your hormones to work well and you want your receptors to work well, you should give your adrenals some TLC because they're the ones making the hormone for you.
Right.
So make sure that you're not stressed out the wazoo. Get on some adaptogens, get on some Nervines, whatever it might be. Like get nutrition to a point where you can actually make hormones efficiently and not fry your poor adrenals in the process. And think about anti-inflammatory stuff. Because inflammation mucks up your ability to use hormones that you do have. So you might not even need to mess with the quantity if you just decrease inflammation and like soothe or better manage your adrenals and your stress and your sleep. Those two things alone could be a world of difference in hormone function and therefore gut function and brain function. So don't think that you have to be on pills or injections or something for your hormones forever and ever.
Right. Yeah, and again, I think hormone replacement therapy is super popular right now. I don't know if it's always been that way, but maybe I'm just hearing about it more. But I think that you're right. Like someone too that's 50 years old shouldn't be having the same levels of hormones as someone that's 25. Like there isn't something very natural about the decline in hormones. You know, maybe you do it for a period of time to just help ease symptoms a little bit, but yeah, I don't think it's the answer. And I think you're right, focusing on the things, different factors that you know will be helpful with building up the integrity of your gut lining. And I mean, there's so many different other factors you could focus in on. It's not like a doom and gloom. Now that you're older, like you can't heal your gut. That's not at all what we're saying. It's about, you know, focusing more intently on certain factors and maybe being a little bit careful with things. Like you might be a little less resilient to like what you were saying, like alcohol and things that might negatively affect it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all connected. It's just a matter of our understanding of the connection sometimes and our acknowledgement of it all. But like, I do think, like I said, a lot of it has to do with our attitude, how we approach things. And if you're open-minded to trying to build healthy habits and maintain healthy habits for your entire lifetime, and you don't ever throw in the towel and say, oh, fuck it, I just want to eat donuts every day for the rest of my life. I do think that aging doesn't have to be a doomsday scenario for your poor gut, but just be mindful your gut might need a little bit more tending to the older you get, and you might need to be a little bit more diligent and mindful of certain factors like sleep and stress and alcohol consumption and eating a diverse amount of different fibers and plant foods, getting enough protein, getting enough iron. But yeah, it's much like the conversation with MTHFR, right? Like you're not doomed.
Yeah.
This is a normal part of the human experience. You're going to get older, we hope. Like, unless you meet some untimely demise at a weirdly young age, like, you're going to get older. That's normal. That's expected. And I would like to think that our bodies have the capacity to deal with that to some degree, as long as we don't trash our bodies in the process.
I'm never getting older.
I don't know. Well, this
I'm just kidding.
This brings up a question, actually. I'm going to wrap up this podcast with a very important philosophical question. I don't know if I've asked you this question, Amy, but I'm going to pose this to you. When you get older and your hair starts to turn gray, women have a very important decision to make. And there's only two choices. There is no third choice. You only have two choices. You have to pick a team. You have to pick a side, and it's going to follow you for the rest of your life.
Oh, okay.
So, Amy, let me ask you this. When you get old and gray, are you going to be the little old lady who has short curly hair in a tight perm like you have right now? Or will you vow to join the long-haired, gray-haired lady clan and wear your hair in a bun, optional, with chopsticks going through the bun? Which team will you be on?
Oh, this is a good question.
I decided my team long time ago.
So I don't want it to be too long.
I mean, this is kind
I don't
of
know if
already
I want
against the philosophy of the long-haired lady clan.
I don't want it to be like too long, because there's some ladies that like when they're getting older, like their hair is like too long and like unmanaged.
Oh, I think you're sounding like a short-haired Sally
No,
to me.
I kind of went in the middle, like maybe, like I don't know, not like this short, but probably shorter, on the shorter side than longer. Are you a longer hair?
As far as I can tell, there are only two flavors of old lady. Long hair in a bun or short hair with a very tight perm. I come from a family of many, many old ladies with short, tight perms, but I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm going to be clan long gray hair in a bun, probably with chopsticks going through the bun.
Well, excellent.
You know, like crisscross.
Good
like
for
this.
you.
Yep, decided it long ago. So you're getting a little bit of that now with the baby powder in the hair. So you're kind of
right.
I do have a bun. It's a spiral bun.
Excellent.
Right now that you can
I
see
can't
it, so.
do buns. I literally can't do it. I never know how to make them.
You want to know my secret? Look, this is taking a turn now, people. Buckle up. Okay, hold on. Let me find it. Can't find it for some reason. They're hard to get out sometimes. So I have these bobby pins, I guess you could call them. But instead of the two prongs of the bobby pin being parallel with each other, like it's the two of them spiral. So what you do, they're miraculous. So what you do is you like twist up the bun however you want it, and then you take these little spirally corkscrew bobby pins and you just twizzle them into the bun, and it holds the bun perfectly stable without needing any hair ties or anything, and it is
excellent.
So, 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Wow, I'm impressed.
I'll take a picture later when I take them out of my hair.
I'm bad at doing my hair. I can't even braid.
This is the only... Oh, I can braid, but I can't do French braids on my own hair very well, but I can do normal braids.
I think if I took it very slow, I could braid like someone else's hair, but I cannot braid. I don't know why, because I'm pretty like, I don't know. I feel like I'm not like horrible with like, I don't have like horrible dexterity or anything. So I don't know why I find it so challenging.
And you grew up with sisters.
Right. I had two sisters.
Weren't you just like braiding each other's hair all day, every day?
No, I was kind of the not angry, but I was like a little bit more angsty, like little child that
Did you go through a goth phase?
No, not even in that way. It's more of like, I had something called the rage. That was what my siblings would call it, where I'd literally get so mad. When I was real young, I'd get so mad where I'd cry until I'd throw up and then I'd be fine. Oh. But then when I got older, I'd like just like go into the stance and shake, and then I would attack. Oh. I would attack my siblings. That was called the rage. So I was sort of a tomboy. I didn't really do anything with my hair.
I was a tomboy, but I still learned how to braid somehow. Yeah.
Well, I feel like you were like in the barn. Like I feel like braiding's a very barny thing to do.
You would think, but here's the thing. So we never really had an opportunity to braid our horses' hair because at all times, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, they would have burdocks in their mane and their tail, to a point where the horses' tails were like weapons because they were 100% burdocks.
Oh my gosh.
And they would just like, they would swish their tail and it would be like a stick of burdocks coming at you like, oh God. So, yeah, we didn't really braid the horse's tail so much, but I guess my mom braided my hair and taught me how. Oh, actually, you know what it was? Barbies. That was the big thing. I remember making my mom braid my Barbie's hair all the time, and I think finally she was like, I'm teaching you how to do this so you can braid your own Barbie's damn hair. So I think that was the big thing for me, was that I was obsessed with Barbies for a long time. And eventually, my mom was like, you need to do this on your own. Enough.
Man, my Barbies were rough. I didn't take very good care of my Barbies. I was just bouncing around, doing God knows what. I was more of like a fort building kid. Like I would go with my little boyfriends in our neighborhood and we'd go build forts in the woods. Nice. So I was still too busy building forts and getting muddy.
We had a fort that we called the Kids Club up in the hayloft in the barn.
Wow. I remember one time growing up literally coming home to my parents, mud head to toe. Like we had made this slide out of mud at my neighbor's house. Like I can't imagine having like a 7-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid coming home just head to toe mud. Like no spot on my body wasn't covered. And I like walk in the door, mom's like, like take off your clothes because you're not going to be like walking around our house. But yeah, I was just a little bit more of a ragamuffin style kid.
A little dirt ball.
Yeah, a little dirt ball.
Yep. Yeah. Well, interestingly, Jess is already paving her own way in life. She's already quite different than I was at this age. So she's almost 6. And I, probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, I decided to give her inheritance. And by inheritance, I mean my My Little Ponies.
Oh.
I saved them like circa 1980s and 1990s. Legit, My Little Ponies. I had them all saved in the attic to give my child someday, and I was so proud. And I gave her these My Little Ponies, and she played with them, I don't know, for like a day maybe, and then she was like, whatever, I'm over it. And she has not touched them since. And I'm like, really? At 6 years old, I would have actually passed out if somebody gave me these.
Gosh.
They're amazing. But she's just like, whatever. So yeah, Jess is more of the ragamuffin that you described, of like, play tag, get in the dirt, build a fort kind of stuff, or like climb something. As opposed to, I would just hunker down with my Barbies and My Little Ponies for, I would still be there if I didn't have to go to school and stuff. But I could just play with those nonstop for the rest of my life when I was this age.
Right. I also think it's hilarious that we went from aging to now talking about us as children.
Yes. Yeah, let's see. What other little fun facts can I stir up from childhood? Well, now that I'm trying to think of it, I'm not thinking of anything good, but I'm sure more stories will be sprinkled in through the next 50 episodes of the IBS Freedom Podcast.
Cheers.
Transitioning back to water now from my cherry blossom Pinot Noir, and this, I keep hitting this happy sign, and it's very confusing. It keeps getting kind of caught on my bun in a funny way.
I was gonna say I've really endured this whole episode with this itchy wig. So I'm excited to take it off. It is itchy.
Yeah. The tiara that I have is magnificent, but it's also, well, hold on. Let me show you. It is bling. And look, you can see the gray, right?
Oh, yes.
I think a little bit on my headphones. So the tiara is amazing and blingy, but it's got like these claw things.
Oh, yeah.
Like help it anchor to your head, but that was starting to give me a teeny bit of a headache. So
yeah,
I'll have to I'll do. Oh God, what do? No, I can't put it on. Oh, on top? No, that doesn't work. No, whatever. I'm done. Done. But now I'm going to save all this stuff for when we have a friend or a family member that turns 50, and then we can celebrate them in style. We probably still have a little while, but
I think my mom turned 60 this year. I'll save that for her.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose the toilet paper even says 50, so I'll have to I'll have to save it. I think either my friend Ginia in Florida, I'll probably save it for her 50th because she's a few years older than me, so she'll be the first. Yep, it'll be epic.
Excellent.
But all right, gang. Well, I think that's a wrap. So you heard it here. Aging and the gut doesn't have to be a doomsday scenario, but it does mean that you probably have to be a bit more mindful and diligent about some aspects of your health and your nutrition as you get older if you want to have good, healthy gut function and poop like a champion well into your later decades. As always, we would so deeply appreciate it if you would share this podcast with your friends, your family, your online Facebook groups, whatever it might be. And as always, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and click like, subscribe, and leave us a comment down below, and we will answer your comments. We will put A's to your Q's when we have our next Q&A episode on the IBS Freedom Podcast. Until then, we will see you next time when we talk about minerals to round out our micronutrient episode series. So until then, I bid you adieu, good fair maiden.
Goodbye.